Hello, welcome to the High Performing Schools webinar, where aspiring to be better is on every leader's agenda. You will learn the one word that Alan Kidd used to create positive relationships, or what Louise Hughes actually does to maintain quality teaching. And then there's David Wanstall's one question to work out school culture. And I will take you through a high performance model that supports teachers and principals to be their very best. So please enjoy. Michael Jordan was drafted from North Carolina to the Chicago Bulls. One of his very first questions to the coach was, so who is the best player on the team at the moment? And the reason why he wanted to know that was because he wanted to be the best and to learn from the best. And what we're looking at really is best practice. My name's Luke George, and over the last 20 years as an education consultant, I've been working with hundreds of principals and schools. And what I've found is that there are some attributes that are common between high-performing schools. What their leaders do, the actions they take, and the decisions they make. So during this webinar, I have at least two of our principals, because we're just waiting for David to join us. And I'd like you to take us through this model that I've found, looking at the communication and reflection between their staff and their students and their stakeholders. They also have three drivers that they're also looking at. What is their purpose? The why. Who are they working for? The people. And also the process, the how they're going to do it. And underneath those three is the actual action that's going to occur. So we need effective leadership. We need to nurture positive relationships. And then we have productive learning environment. Number 4 is about accountable use of resources. Number 5 is nurturing well-being, very important for staff and students. Then there's that quality teaching. And of course, evidence-based student achievement and progress. Now, in these particular areas is what we're going to look at very briefly with our panelists and how they've actually enacted and worked on these particular areas. And now I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. And we have Louise Hughes. Now, Louise is currently the Waikiki principal. She just started there this year. But however, she was the deputy principal of Callista Primary, where a few years ago under Craig Skinner. So Louise, how are you enjoying Waikiki Primary?
Good, thank you. Never a dull moment. Brilliant, great opportunity to be here and to bring some things that I learned from Callista through to Waikiki.
Fantastic, we're looking forward to hearing about that. And then we also have Alan Kidd, who has that illustrious title now of Principal Retired from Kingston Primary School down there in Bunbury. And how are you enjoying your retirement, and how did you enjoy your few years or many years as a principal, Alan?
Yeah, look, sitting in a seedy motel in Margaret River at the moment, so thoroughly enjoying my time. Not in the fray, you might say, but 37 years in education, 30 of them as a principal all around Western Australia. I had a blessed career, absolutely loved it. Still dabbling a little bit in education with some keeping my head in the game, you might say, and enjoying life.
Fantastic. Now, we would have loved to have had David Wanstall here with us, but we had a few technical problems, so I'm sure we'll be able to get him back either later on in this webinar or in one of the ones that are going to be coming. Now, so we're going to get stuck into it, as in to actually delve a little bit deeper into what makes and creates a high-performing school. But what is it that I chose these particular principles for? So number one was that these principles were leaders of Centre of Excellence for Literacy in partnership with Curtin University. So that certainly puts them at the highest stakes. Number two is that they're great people, but more importantly, I've found that they have an unwavering focus on student education and performance. And when I've been lucky enough to have the conversations with the principals, they just have this, you can see the passion in their eyes. And I believe that's one of our big pieces in being able to perform at a high performance school. So we'll start with you, Louise, down there at Waikiki and used to be there at Callista. I know that you're really keen on quality teaching, and we spoke about a particular method, I suppose, that you actually take time to do with your teachers. Can you describe a little bit about how you maintain that high quality teaching to the standards that you require?
Yeah, there's quite a few things that I've used during my career to support and develop teachers. So the main one through performance development, through that cycle as a line manager, a lot of coaching and mentoring support, focusing on literacy and numeracy predominantly. At Callista Primary, in my deputy role, I organised a lot of peer observations. So it was around, particularly when we had induction for new staff, getting teachers to watch teachers. For my part, it was to support effective feedback. So it's all very well to go and watch, but what are we watching and what are we looking at, and how do we feed back to each other in a positive, effective way? So I did a lot of work with the staff around that. I also worked with groups of teachers, so to support them. So we'd have not just a peer observation, but for example, that some of the graduates, they'd work together. We'd all sort of look at planning, and then we'd watch a lesson. We focused a lot on developing reading. So we watched, and then we sort of fed back in a group. And again, it was around developing those norms around effective feedback that and building that trust and that rapport. So those are two ways that I've used in the past. Filming is another fabulous way of developing and supporting effective practice. So a lot of the staff that I've worked with were quite open to me with my wonky tripod and my camera at the back of the room, trying to make some videos of effective practice, which I still use now in my new position, which is really, really good. We also used a lot of visiting other schools, looking at effective practice, so it's sharing across networks as well. Callista was a teacher development school for literacy and numeracy, which meant that schools could approach us, communicate with us, and we used to have teachers come in and observe our teachers. And we've also, I think, before my time at Callista, I think staff went to Ballajura, and David would know about that. So there's lots of different ways that we can develop and maintain high quality delivery. But the main one for me, which I find is a surefire way of working, is getting in the classrooms, putting my money where my mouth is, and showing what I think effective practice looks like, which is a little bit scary, but it does enable teachers to gain that mutual respect. So I'm not just sort of sitting there saying, well, I think. It's like, can I show you what I'd like this to look like? And I've got a few examples if I've got time to share a couple.
Yeah, go on, just definitely give us one or two, please. Because I'm loving the idea of the modelling. That's the part that I reckon fantastic.
So when she was modelling through an I-Do of a writing lesson, she was projecting the writing on the board and talking through all of the good points of the text. what I was trying to encourage her to do was to actually be the writer and to actually write on the board and model, so put your writing hat on. So there's all that rich self-talk, and that you were working your way through the process. So rather than me talking to her, I asked her if I could have it planning. It was around Easter time, and so I took the planning and developed the lesson, and then I stood and taught and did put my writing hat on. It was easy, she was in the room, so she was there managing the children as well, so I actually could be the writer and model what I thought effective writing looked like. And that worked really well. So then she had a go and did the next lesson, and she videoed herself to show me. So that kind of worked together was really effective, I found. So that's one example I'll share with you.
No worries. No, look, thank you very much for that. And there was a couple of great words that you used there. Is number one was the modelling, and that also that I suppose you put your money where your mouth is, and you actually got in there, got your hands dirty. And I could imagine you quite a range. You had to do the little people at year 1 pre-primary all the way up to year 6, and be all over it. But I'm sure by seeing each classroom, you would have seen the standard and quality of of the teachers in the actual school. So you would have had a real handle on it. So that's those real touch points. Now I'd like to give you a question, Alan, and this one is in regards to when we were having a conversation of building the trust and building the culture of the school, and the words or the mantras that you brought in. And I'd like you to share with us the idea of acknowledgement and how that came about and what you did and the changes that came from just a simple word like acknowledgement.
Yeah, look, the words that get thrown around in schools over the years, and I suppose I can reflect back and now look at the litany of scars and the mistakes that I've made over many years. But I had a deputy principal that I'll acknowledge in this way back in my days at a school in Bunbury, and he was an older gentleman. I was the youngest on staff in this school, and he had a mantra, you might say, of acknowledging every student that went past him. Now, this was a school of around 350. He didn't necessarily know all their names, but he would acknowledge every student, whether that be "G'day, Fred," "High five," "Knuckles," "You got new shoes," "You need a haircut," whatever. And John McKernan was his fellow's name. He's been retired for many, many years. And as a young principal who had his eyes firmly set on leadership and vision and, stamping my leadership credentials, to watch this fellow in action just showed me that the strength of building a culture on acknowledgement. So following that through, when I had the opportunity to open a new school at Kingston, which grew very, very rapidly, it became an administrative mantra. I was very fortunate to have an admin team, a very high caliber admin team there, and we had admin mantras, and that was that we would be visible, very visible every morning when the kids came into the school. We would all be out and we would acknowledge every student that came past us with whatever conversation. That took about a week before the kids would get in before us, and it suddenly became a culture builder. So before I could say good morning, they would be saying good morning from 30, 40, 50 meters away. It then spread to the parents. It then spread to, from an instructional leadership perspective, every staff member. And suddenly that culture starts developing, that we acknowledge the people around us. We don't cocoon ourselves. We actually show a genuine, authentic interest in the well-being of other people. The information that we found out in those conversations before instruction started in the school allowed us to address so many issues prior to them becoming big ones, you suddenly acknowledge the kid that didn't have his shoes on the right feet and looked a bit hungry and didn't do his hair. So, okay, what's going on? You've got that information that may not be said, but acknowledged, and you were able to act on that before issues start to have. So it's a culture building exercise of acknowledgement. Staff, it's more deadly than transferable than a coronavirus, really, isn't it? It's something that just grows. It just is something that becomes part of your mantra and your day-to-day being.
No,
and it worked well.
I appreciate that, Alan, and it certainly captured my my interest when you can take something as simple as acknowledgement and it can spread. And before you know it, we just know more things about people than we did before. Now, great news! We've now been joined by young David Wanstall, the principal of Balladura Primary School, of which I think is, David, how many years have you been there at Balladura?
14th year, Luke.
14 years. Now, David, one of the big things that's been happening out of Balladura for the last 8 years that certainly puts Balladura in that category of high performance is that out of 80 possible NAPLAN scores over 8 years, you've received 69 green boxes, which means that it's above expected results. And that's tremendous. Now, we've spoken about the sort of work that you've done there to get that particular academic result, but one of the things that has come out that's pretty important, and one most important really in our imperatives, is the effective leadership. So, David, do you just want to give us a little bit of insight how you created this effective leadership down there at Balladura Primary School?
Oh, sure, Luke. And firstly, good morning to everybody. And I'm sorry that I came in so late, but we had some technology issues, as you always seem to do with these things going on. And just picking up a little bit on what Alan said, and it's really about building culture in your school. And for us, leadership's been really, really important because basically everything flows down from that. So as a team, we're constantly revising what we're doing and having conversations. I'm not sure how far you've got into those 7 imperatives that you were going to identify today, but measuring ourselves against those. And, earlier you and I were having a conversation about possibly having a poster on the back of your wall with those 7 things listed. And it's not anything in a technical sense where we measure, but we're constantly just looking at those and measuring ourselves against them and saying, are we meeting those targets? Are we continuously improving? Are we building a culture where everybody is embedded in an environment of improvement, and do they want to engage in that? I think the exciting thing about Balladura Primary School is we've really come from a culture where we were totally the opposite of green boxes. I think when I first arrived here, we was in the days of Walner, but we would have had 100% red boxes. And it took an awful long time to win the staff over and start to get them to understand that if we all work together, in a sense working towards trying to win a grand final as a school, then that's going to have massive benefits in relation to what we came into the profession for, and that's to make a difference for kids.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to shoot back over to you, Louise, because starting at Waikiki, coming from Callista, I dare say you would have had a bit of a mantra, as in what Alan had, and to create that clear vision as a leader, so the staff pretty well know exactly what the standards are. How do you first start that conversation and presentation to the teachers, so they know exactly where you're coming from? Your first days at Waikiki, your first presentation, staff meeting, how did that go so they knew where they needed to be?
I started in term 4 of last year, so towards the end of the year, and incidentally at the end of Waikiki's current business plan, so we're due to start a new one now, which we have. I think for me, the first day walking into the school, I'd done a presentation just about me, my likes, my dislikes, tried to do quirky, funny, just to try and get for them to see my personality and to see me as well as a leader. So I introduced myself that way, and then I spent most of term 4 sitting back, observing, looking at the context of the school, having some formal, informal conversations with staff, school board, the P&C, and just starting to find the lay of the land at Waikiki. From term 4 and then beyond, I took opportunities to start to share a little bit around my story and my history, so more on a professional level, so where I'd come from. I tried not to use that at my last school, we did, but I tried to talk about my beliefs, my philosophies around education, and particularly talked about my strengths, and my strengths are curriculum and pedagogy, and just started to sort of share that with the staff. I also then, after I'd done that, sort of took the time to celebrate with the staff at Waikiki what was really working here, because there's some really good stuff going on. We've got some great kids, really supportive parents on the whole, a good community feel. There is lots of elements of good teaching in classrooms, some different approaches, but good stuff. And it's a well-resourced school. When I shared all of this with the staff, those are my thoughts. I also asked the staff to outline their thoughts about what was working within the school. So with that, I then took the opportunity to take the next step, which was to have a look at the NAPLAN data with the staff. So again, we've got some greens, we could do some more. So we talked about where our areas of strength were, where our weaknesses were, and what we possibly could do about that. So then that sort of filtered in to me talking about my thoughts around best practice. So celebrated successes, looked at where we're at according to the data, and then sharing my thoughts about where we can go forward. So strongly believe in a consistent evidence-based pedagogical approach from K to 6, that, my thoughts around that. A focus on what matters most. So for us at Waikiki, the focus is literacy and numeracy. Everything else happens, but on a lower scale. That all our students can achieve, and we can achieve more success. Every second counts, every kid can do their best, should do their best, and we need to encourage them to do that, and we need to teach them effectively. And then I also talked about, that's around my shared purpose, and how we could start to think about building collective teacher efficacy.
No worries.
So around confidence to do that. So after I'd done all of that sort of work, term 1, before COVID, we had lots of consultation, lots of workshops around developing the shared vision, which is driven by my personal vision, but I ensured all staff had a voice. So that's how we've now developed our shared vision and new business plan to move forward for the next 3 years.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate, and I'm sure the staff would have, that you started with what you were doing well and asked them to what they're doing well. So you started from that positive platform, and then how can we can improve. And also you brought not your own where you came from, but your beliefs and your vision. And I dare say that would have allowed everybody to join that vision, because people want to follow a leader that they believe in as well. So I can really see how that would have worked. Now, Alan, down there at Kingston, I dare say you would have had some areas where you needed to improve. When as you were starting your school, you could start to see the sort of quality of people coming through. How did you ensure that you got the right teachers to be in the right class at the right time? And was that a fairly difficult task, considering sometimes we don't get the right people on the right bus?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I suppose your leadership evolves in regard over the years, and you look at what you've done before and you go, okay, I need to change what I do. The whole culture vision thing is critical to this, and they can be throwaway terms, and I probably have not gone into the depth and complexity of what vision and culture means in schools. But that evolved. When I had the opportunity to open Kingston Primary School, it was a put up or shut up moment, really. It was stop whinging. You can now address some of those issues. I want to go back to the previous school where I came into a school, a very large one, that was back in the days where they publicly acknowledged underperforming schools, and this was one of them. And I thought I'd done an amazing effort in doing the analogies and the pictorial stuff with the staff to say, you know, here is the vision. And I actually drew a picture of a boat. The school motto was actually, a symbol was a ship. And everybody's on this ship and we're all going in the same direction and everybody's looking in the same direction. And, you know, I was pretty proud of that visual, you know, get on the boat, we're off. And I was actually sitting down having a conversation with my good friend Paul Swan a little while afterwards. And Paul's one of those guys, if I say it's green, he'll say it's red. He loves those conversations. And he said, who's looking out for the pirates? And the penny dropped. It's a fantastic, ridiculous question, but who's looking out for the pirates? Who's looking out for the reefs? Who's looking out for the sharks? The penny dropped in that it's actually the boat that has to head towards where we want to go. And it's not until you've got the people on board looking out for the sharks and the reefs and the pirates that you get the buy-in and the vested interest. So it's not you trying to clear the decks of all of the obstacles that will stop the boat from getting there. It's actually the staff buying in and saying, we can identify that if we go down that path, that's the reef, we're going to have to deal with that. It's the staff, that investment, and they will navigate the way through. So going back into Kingston, when we developed our staffing profile and looked at how this school was going to grow so significantly, we went from 0 to 870 in 5 years. It was massive. We made a very clear mantra in our staffing profile, which is that we can turn nice people into great teachers. We can't necessarily turn great teachers into nice people. So we looked for the growth capacity. We looked at profiling people who bought in to the established vision. And I think if I've got a criticism of the whole IPS movement at a time, that profiling and revisioning, if we go back to the ideas stuff that Crowther did all those years ago, revisioning your school so you know what you stand for and you know what we believe in, and this is the way we're going to, you know, we're a virtues-based school, so that's the social emotional language that we're going to use.
Yeah.
People have the opportunity to buy into that, and you can then grow those people within that culture. So the words vision and culture became so more meaningful in that regard, and growing those nice people is just probably one of the most successful things I did in my career, is being able to select staff that you could grow.
Yeah, I love the idea of the boat. We use one at Nerridgen Brook about the bus, and we're now going to be looking a little bit closer about who's looking outside. We've got them looking out the window, but what are we looking for? I like that vision that everybody's on board to protect the boat and also to continue the boat moving forward. Which brings us to you, David, talking about culture. And when we've had that discussion in regards to culture, you bring a fantastic analogy in regards to what we call the coffee test in regards to your teachers. And I think this is actually very pertinent, and it certainly makes me think about what's happening at schools when we apply the coffee test. And I'm sure everybody listening will be able to have a quick think about how their school's travelling after listening to David's coffee test. Could you explain to us all about the coffee test and culture, David?
Yeah, love to, Luke. Thank you. And firstly, Alan, couldn't agree more with all the comments that you just made. That's exactly the philosophy that we would adopt here at Ballajura. It's the quality of the people that make the difference. And what's interesting with the Centre of Excellence and the teachers and principals that we've been working with is having conversations about understanding your own school and understanding your own culture. And quite often I'll sit with the principal and have a bit of a conversation and go, you know, what do you think people think about your school out there in the community? And they go, oh, you know, I think they think we're going pretty well. And I'll say, what do your teachers say about your school? And they go, oh, no, I really think they enjoy staying here. And I said, well, you really need to try and adopt what I would call the coffee test. And it's really the most simple test in the world. And that is to put yourself in the place of a teacher, or you can use this as a parent. And if your teacher goes down to the coffee shop and let's say there's 10 new people sitting around some tables and you're introduced to those people, there are normally 4 questions that you're going to be asked when you sit down. And the first one is, what's your name? Which is a pretty easy one to answer. The second one that you most often get asked is, what do you do? By and large, you're going to say, you know, I'm a teacher. And then the third question is, what school do you work at? And then you'll answer that question. But then the clanger comes, and that is, what do you think of your school? And just too often you hear people talking down their school or talking down their colleagues or what they're involved in. And in order to pass the coffee test, you would want a staff member to say their name. You want to say that I'm a teacher. You want to say that I work at such and such primary school. And then when they ask, what do you think of your school? For them to say it is the best place that I ever could be working at, and for all of these reasons. And the reason the coffee test is so important is because that then sends a direct message to those 10 people about the love those people have of their school and the work that they do. But more importantly, put yourself in the shoes of a parent and being asked those same sorts of questions. What do you think of Ballajura Primary School? And sharing that with that 10 people, that just makes everybody sit up and go, wow, that must be a fantastic school and your child must love going there. So I call it the coffee test because it's something that we need to sort of get outside of our bubble with and allow people to be able to speak freely. And it's a great reflection question in relation to thinking about what people would say of your school.
Thank you, David. It's certainly, I dare say there's a few people right now thinking about what some of their staff would say about their school. And if it's more towards the negative than the positive, that then promotes the next question about how can I change that? And then we get back into that culture. What is it that we're doing at this school that's not allowing the positive affirmations that we want? Because there's no use thinking about that we could be there. It's about being there where we want to be. Now, Louise, I'm interested from your perspective, how you would nurture the well-being of your staff at the moment going through the COVID. What sort of, did you actually put any things in place in that particular area going through that? Because I know that was a major area for most schools, and how you came through it. Just just a minute or so on that, any particular strategies, and continuing with the well-being of staff.
I think the key thing when COVID sort of, I think it was week 9 when things started to really happen, was being transparent with the staff around what we were being told via the department, sharing plans, guidelines, and keeping that line of communication open so that they felt supported and they felt that they understood where they stood around the future plans and the future with COVID. So in light of the fact we were looking at delivering online. So working with the staff to support them with what we asked them to do. Not physically checking in with them, but through WebEx, etc., letting them know that there were avenues of support if they felt that they needed it, whether it be through the department or through socially distanced coffee or a chat, and letting them know that it's okay if they're not feeling or travelling well, that we can work through that and support them with that. So always trying to sort of to push and promote that their well-being is of course important, because without them firing on all four cylinders, the school's not going to run. So yeah, it was about just checking in and keeping the lines of communication open. That was my approach.
No, that was good. And just we're getting close towards the end, and I just wanted to ask Alan, after looking from the outside, now looking in. Alan, do you think that all schools have that opportunity to improve year on year? Is it possible to actually change the culture and change the performance, as we've seen in David's school with his results and what you did at Kingston? Is it possible for any principal to be able to move into the direction where the illustrious panelists are right now?
Not retired, yeah, absolutely. Look, I do have the opportunity to now reflect and look back without being in the middle of it, and I take my hats off to the work principals have done in recent times. It's very difficult times, but I think one of the issues is that schools need to know where they're at right now. Every school is the school that they are at this particular point. And there are also, I'm a big believer in motives. Why is that school? Why has it had a succession of leaders through it, therefore lost some clarity in where it's going? Has it had a high staff turnover? Is it a very transient school? But a snapshot of this is the school right now, and identifying this is where we're at. Until you know that, you don't know where you can go. You've actually got to identify the bits and pieces. So some clarity around that is, if asking some very simple questions. I believe every school can show progress and improvement. I have my grandson going to school next year, and the question that I would be wanting as I'm going to say a parent, a grandparent to ask, so look out that particular principle, but would be, if I send my child to your school, how will they learn mathematics? Pretty simple question. What can I expect? Now, I was asked that question a long time ago at a school, and I'd only been there a term. And my answer was, well, if you're in Louise's class, you'll get a bit of that. And if you're in David's class, you'll get a bit of that. If you're in Luke's, this parent, who just happened to be a professor at the university, looked at me and said, don't you know? I'm still getting over that moment. I did know, but it wasn't happening. I hadn't been there long enough. There was, as educators, we need to be able to answer that on behalf of our schools. If I send my child to this school, what can I expect? And as David said at the coffee test, everyone in the school should be able to say, this is the direction we're going, this is how we're improving, and this should be evidenced in every classroom I walk into. That's when you know you've got the culture of progress and improvement and belief happening.
No worries. Thank you very much. Now, well, the good news is like a segue. I've actually created a survey of 90 questions that can actually pinpoint where you are as a performing school, looking at the 7 imperatives, which we can go into at another time. It is 8 o'clock, and I dare say the students and teachers are starting to move into your schools, etc. I really appreciate everybody attending the one of, hopefully, a few more of these sort of webinars, delving into what makes a high performance school. I really appreciate, Louise, your time for coming along and sharing your journey. I appreciate Alan, coming up from early in the morning from your retirement. I dare say you're off to go and do something relaxing now. I appreciate that. I'm loving to see that you're still so invested in education. And thank you very much, David, more for persistence to be part of this and share some of your tips, especially those insights into your NAPLAN and the coffee test. Until next time, folks, this is Luke George from By George, and if you need any assistance or anything like that, please get in contact and we can go go from there. Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate your time, and I will see you another time. Bye now.